Okay. Good afternoon, all, and welcome from EUA. My name is Vinciane Gaillard, and I'm very pleased to see you today for this webinar called Developing Institutional Policies for Open Access Books. So before we get into the details, let me just give you some hints as to how you can interact with us. So you have a chat box. You can just like say hi to colleagues, refer back to technical issues and put some other comments and remarks there. If you have questions for speakers, please put them in the Q&A tab, which is a separate one. We will put them on screen, we will adapt and we will address them later on. Also, something that is important to note is that this event is hosted on a platform called Cvent. It's a platform that you can use also after the webinar to download the presentation and the material, as well as recordings from this webinar and the other webinars from the same webinar series. I'll get to that in a minute. So you can watch the other recordings as well as this one afterwards on the platform. So you can also interact with other participants on the platform and register for future webinars in the series. So I was mentioning that this is part of a discussion we've had at EUA for a while already. In the past, we organized a webinar series on universities and the future of scholarly publishing. That was already back in 2021. Then we had in 2023 a webinar on institutional approaches to rights retention, and we resumed with a webinar series on the future of scholarly communication. Note the difference between scholarly publishing and scholarly communication here in 2024. We had a first one in this series on the 22nd of May, building a just scholarly publishing ecosystem. We have the one today on open access books. And the next one will be organized in December. Date is still to be confirmed on open repositories in Europe. And we have yet another round already scheduled in 2025, when we will address Open Research Europe and AI in scholarly communication, among others or other topics. As part of our activities at EUA on the topic, it is to mention that we are preparing a briefing paper for university leaders on the future of scholarly communication. It is meant as a Reader's Digest for university leaders as to the recent developments in that field and to support decision-making for university leaders when it comes to scholarly communication. Now, let's say the general background of all those activities is the EUA Open Science Agenda that we published almost 3 years ago with key priorities and a vision for 2025. What is important to note is that we have 3 priorities in this agenda, and the first one is obviously of core importance today. It is about universal and perpetual open access to scholarly outputs in a just scholarly publishing ecosystem. And we define a just scholarly publishing ecosystem here. It is an ecosystem that is transparent, diverse, economically affordable and sustainable, technically interoperable, and steered by the research community and its institutions through coordinated policies. So here comes the notion of policies that we will be addressing today. Another relevant document from EUA is the new University Open Access Checklist. So an important note here is that this has been developed originally in the context of open access to research articles and publications, but there are many things there that are very much valid when it comes to open access books too. So there are 3 pillars in this checklist, and by no means it means to be, it is meant to be, let's say, a tick box exercise. It's just like a tool for universities to help them navigating the open access landscape. It has 3 main pillars: one to empower, the other one to build capacity, and the last one on reinforcing existing structures. And you can see for each of them, this is only a kind of a snapshot of what you have in the checklist, but for each and every single one, areas of activities, we identify priorities or possible recommendations or as to the possible actions. We also explain for each of them the rationale. We propose several activities that could fit under that category. And then we discuss also, well, obviously the benefits, that as well as possible considerations or points of attention related to that specific one. So you may want to look at that too. So with this, I will stop with the general intro from EUA. It's time now to listen to our panelists. I will introduce them now. You have their names here listed. We first have Michael Laxo from Tampere University. He's Associate Professor on Information Studies, and he represents today the PALOMERA project. This is a joint webinar co-organized with the PALOMERA project. Michael will tell you all about the project in a minute. We will then have 3 case studies from universities and university presses. The first one who will take the floor is Nienke Roelands. She's Managing Director at Leuven University Press. Then we will have Dara Snowden. She's a program manager at UCL Press. And then last but not least, we will hear from Robert Wiese, the head of Berlin University's Press Publishing, well, UP Books at Berlin University's Publishing. I'll leave it there for now, and I invite now Michael to come in to tell you more about PALOMERA. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Vinciane, and thank you everyone for joining this webinar. I'm really honored to get the opportunity to speak about something we've been working on for the last 20 months and are now ready to unveil some of the final outputs from in the coming months. So my name is Mikael Laakso, and I currently work at Tampere University, where I focus on scholarly communication and open science. I used to be connected to Hanken School of Economics until about a month ago, and that's where the project PALOMERA is still being conducted. So that's where you'll see that name showing up in my slides here as well. But I've been the work package lead for the analysis work package in PALOMERA, so responsible for drawing out some insights from the rich data that we've collected in the project. But now I've already spoken a bit ahead of myself. Let's introduce what the project is about, because I think it might be something new to many of you, because we haven't really been able to show tangible outputs much before now, when we actually have the results out. This is just like an info slide about the project overall, who are the project consortium members. So around Europe, we have different partners that have been responsible for of course, a lot of intensive collaborative work, but also, as I said, for example, me here housed in Finland have been responsible for the analysis work package, and then used some of my researcher expertise from bibliometrics and information studies to contribute to that. And it's funded by Horizon as part of EU funding, and it runs until the end of this year. So we are about to soon have the major outputs out, and then have a lot of engagement to do after that. But just so you know roughly what we're talking about, these are the facts about the project. The whole scope of it and still is to improve the understanding of how scholarly books, academic books, are currently present in the current landscape in the European research area, and what the kind of bottlenecks are for making them open access. So figuring out what the major roadblocks are through a policy lens in this instance, quite prominently. What are the major blockages for being a bit more kind of progressive when it comes to including open access books also in the many open access policies that different organizations and countries have. And then another highlight of the project is to create alignment and collaboration in this policy making, policy setting process, so that there is a lot of kind of synergies to be had if universities as well as research funders and national open science policies would all kind of be aware of what each party is doing, and maybe even communicate during the process, so that there would be clear handovers and responsibilities and clear roadmaps for how OA books could fit into the different areas of influence that these actors have. So the goal has been to have like a holistic perspective on the whole policy setting process, not just limiting it to just one stakeholder. But still, based on the whole funding call from where PALOMERA is funded, there was this added emphasis on taking a special magnifying glass on research performing organizations and research funding organizations, because, well, I won't say why they set it within the call as such, but of course we know that these are the types of organizations that have been very prominent in having open access policies and are contributing most majorly to that landscape. Then there's, of course, national policy coming in. There's different publishers, scholarly societies, infrastructures, libraries, and individual researchers and their perspectives that also need to be taken into account. But from the policy alignment and policy understanding perspective, we were kind of instructed and have emphasized our data collection for these two types of organizations. And I would say the three first bullet points here are so-called tangible outputs that you can pick up in your hand and browse and click around in and figure stuff out from. So we already have on the open web a knowledge base. So basically a website where we've collected all the open access policies that we've collected during the project and have added metadata to them so that they are browsable on the country level, stakeholder categories and so forth, as well as interview transcripts that we have had permission to distribute. So there's a lot of, some would say research data, but some would also just say interesting materials for anyone interested in OA policies to have a closer look at, that are part of the OAPEN's Open Access Book Toolkit. So unfortunately, the link isn't clickable here, but if you Google around and also as a follow-up email to this event, you will get some helpful links later on that will help you navigate some of our key outputs. What we're currently working very intensively on this week is the report on the analysis that will be out later in October. And that is also why I want to spend some time here talking about some of the recommendations that stem from all of this, because we want everything to be evidence-based and kind of tied to some observations that we've made throughout the project if we make recommendations. And then the two following ones are basically about engagement with stakeholders, trying to see that we reach the right audiences for input during and also now kind of after the project is closing down, to see where we are able to feed in with usable input. So I think the most kind of work-intensive part of what I've been involved in has been this open access policy research. So we've collected hundreds of open access policies from funders and institutions in Europe, and went in with a lens of like 17 different policy elements that we were looking for and seeing if they are present in the policies. So for example, do they mention specific OA models? Do they have mentions about rights and licensing? Do they have funding information? This is just like a high-level pie chart of those elements, but it can be broken down into 17 different parts. And for the policies that explicitly mentioned books, we went even deeper to kind of extract each text passage for where one of these elements occur in the policy. So we have quite a, I would say, extensive database on how different actors formulate things around open access, and in particularly open access books within these policies. This is too much to take in right now. I won't kind of dissect it and kind of go through it in detail, but just so you know that it could look something like this when we look at the data for the different policies and what they include. So we can see here that, for example, quite many specify the types of books by some way of saying what is an academic book to us and when does it need to be open access and when does it not. And OA models are mentioned also quite frequently and so forth. So just so you have an idea of what we've been doing in the project. We've been looking systematically through all these hundreds of OA policies and identified where specific things are mentioned or not mentioned to some degree, and then extracted that text when it concerns books in particular. But then we come into the recommendations, and that's maybe where the most immediate interest might lie in this audience as well. That stems from all of these policy documents that we've collected from the ERA countries, the interviews we've conducted, and also our literature review that has been supplementing all of this. So it all connects to this. And we have references added also in the coming recommendations document so that you can see where most of the key insights are coming from. And when we started formulating these recommendations, the idea has been this alignment idea, so that we have some common recommendations for everyone in the landscape, and then also thought about how different actors fit in together like puzzle pieces with the actions they could consider doing, so that there isn't contradicting recommendations, so to say, that we've tried to think about the whole process of adoption for all of our recommendations in that type of way. I'm realizing I'm running out of time a bit soon, so I'll just skip ahead for you to see just the headings. These are not the full recommendations. There's paragraphs of text attached to all of these, but you can see here that they are for the general recommendations. I think these are like probably pretty understandable just by looking at this as what are some actions that could be done to increase open access book adoption as well as inclusion in policies. And I'd like to say the two first ones are really critical. From looking at these hundreds of policies over the last 10 months or so, I would really say I would like to have nicer formulations of what type of books specifically are you including in the policy, as well as how should that open access be achieved. Because quite often policies require something without really delivering the means, like saying how you should do it. There's no funding, there's no model mentioned, but you're still requiring open access. Who should I get in touch with, or how should that be realized? Could maybe be a good idea to consider including. But quite many of these recommendations have to do with clarity. So it's not about strength of policy that we would recommend actors to be more aggressive in this, but I think a lot of the battle can be just achieved by being more clear and being thinking about the whole process of from policy to realization, how that should work out for those who are supposed to act upon the policy. And these are kind of, to close out soon, the recommendations for universities, where you can see, for example, that there's a handful of specific recommendations that we have for universities with motivations for why we think it would be good to consider these for any institution that would like to strengthen and be more aligned when it comes to all of this. But let's see. Let's jump to my finishing slide here. I would say just what we need to know now for PALOMERA for this session is that I think we have the most comprehensive and up-to-date kind of data on where open access policies, particularly for books, but also I would say for journals, quite accidentally are at the moment, because we also collected information about that. And we've shared all the data we can to make it as reusable and kind of additive as possible in the future. And those of you that are super interested in all of this, I could do some cross promotion that we will have our kind of final event, our PALOMERA conference in the end of October. So please tune in online if you want to follow some of the kind of spaces where there's a bit more time to elaborate on the findings. But all of these major outputs will be out in the coming months. So please have a look in your inbox for communications from this event as well that will provide you with links to those. But thank you very much for the opportunity to speak about this thing.
Thank you so much, Michael. It was very clear. Something I didn't mention when I introduced the topic is that it's apparently raises and meets a good interest from the community, because I'm happy to say that we have over 180 people with us today following the webinar. So I think that it's really spot on in terms of the needs from the community. So thank you very much for that. There will be time for questions and interaction with the speakers, but now I would like to introduce and to welcome Dara Snowden. So Dara will tell us more about what is exactly on her first slide. So on UCL Press as the first fully open access university press. The floor is yours. You will tell us more about what you do, why is it that you do that, and how you do that, and then we will take it afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, happy to tell you a bit more. My name is Dara Snowden and I am the Programme Manager at UCL Press, and I'm really pleased to be able to share with you a bit more about UCL Press and our journey and our OA Books policy, how it was created and what we've learned over the last 10 years. So I've included that in my first slide. We're almost 10 years old now. And we are very much embedded within our parent institution's library services. So that's where we sit. Our institution has a long history of disruptive thinking and innovation, and it's really this pioneering ethos that has carried the institution into the setup of the press. Let me turn to my first slide. Okay, so why did we start publishing books? I've included here a quote from our former Vice Provost, Professor David Price, who's talking about the current state of publishing. And essentially it was from the belief that research should be made as widely available as possible, and that the current publishing ecosystem at the time was not offering institutions, researchers, or research a pathway to achieve this effectively. It also merged with a time at UCL in which our institution was experiencing a bit of a cultural change. So there was more discovering and embracing of open practices. This largely began within the sciences in our institution, but has really filtered through to other disciplines and faculties. So it was a combination of these two things, a real dissatisfaction with the current research publishing ecosystem, and then also the increase and slow embrace of open policies, open practices, a bit more of an experimental mindset towards alternatives to the current ecosystem. So what do we publish, and what do we publish open access, and what is our policy? We are largely a diamond open access publisher. We produce scholarly monographs, edited collections, short monographs, textbooks and journals, so really across a really broad range of outputs. And we publish all of these under a Creative Commons license. That is a really key part of our policy. And essentially that's to increase discoverability and to allow our content to be modified and adaptable. That's a really key part of our open ethos. We publish across a really wide range of disciplines and offer a flexible and personal approach to each project. By that I mean we don't have firm word count limits. We're open to discussion in terms of how, what an author feels is the right amount of material to suit a particular topic or to suit a particular audience. We're very open to discussion around publishing formats, so different sizes, different kind of different ways of publishing, and certainly within design, be that the cover or the design of the inside of the book. We really want to base all of our decision making on each project in context to the type of material, the type of research, and the kind of audience that we're hoping to reach, so that we can maximize that kind of discoverability and access. We publish our books as freely downloadable PDFs, which is the primary format that we promote, but also provide the option for readers to purchase physical copy via POD or an ebook copy, EPUB copy. All of our books undergo a rigorous peer review and are scrutinized by our publishing boards before approval to offer contract. So that's a part of our publication process. And we are very much open to proposals from across all subjects and actively encourage submissions from early career researchers. So that's, again, something a bit different from what the commercial publishing system is offering. Move on to my next slide. Okay, this slide illustrates our publishing activity to date and hopefully gives you a bit of a snapshot of, I think, the different phases that we've gone through in our 10 years. So the volume of books has increased over time, as you can see, and that's because we've seen demand grow, but also our ability to report impact has really helped us to secure additional funding to be able to accommodate a growing number of books at various intervals in the last 10 years. So, we started with a very small number of books and were able to publish those effectively, see those downloads coming through, and then we had growing interest, growing demand, and that helped us secure additional funding. So we are now moving towards publishing 60 books in 2025, so another growth for us of an additional 10 books to our previous output. So as I said, we are mostly a diamond open access press. We are mostly funded by our parent institution in terms of how we are able to pay for the publishing. They provide the financial backing to facilitate our publishing and operating costs. However, we do need to charge BPCs to some of our non-UCL authors. So I say some. We have a waiver scheme. So for the first 5 successfully peer-reviewed and board-approved non-UCL authored monographs, we will waive that fee. So we will absorb the costs of producing those. We also don't charge a BPC if you are a non-UCL author writing a book for one of our 15 book series, or if you have a UCL co-author or a UCL co-editor, so some kind of connection back to UCL. In that case, we will be able to waive that fee. So we are trying to find ways in which we don't have to charge non-UCL authors that book processing charge, but for some we will have to, and that's really to cover the costs of production. Our BPCs, I think, are listed here, and they remain lower than commercial industry standards. We've also been keeping an eye on our authorship ratios, and I've listed here we're approximately about 50-50 in terms of authors and editors that we publish that are UCL based and non-UCL based, and we hope to continue that trend. I've listed here some guiding principles of our policy. So these have really been identified and solidified by our governance structure and the boards for our various programs, and those boards are made up of stakeholders within our institution, key figures in the library, and academics. So we have a really broad remit in terms of the membership of our boards that help us to define some of these policies. But essentially our guiding principles for books are that the idea of taking back ownership of publishing and having the university support the entire research life cycle. That's really important to us, and one of the reasons we created the press. The creation of OA publishing opportunities for arts, humanities and social sciences, as well as STEM. They've traditionally received less support in open access than STEM, and so we're hoping to sort of recorrect that balance. And also thinking about value as social and global impact. So the different ways that we're able to do that when removing the financial barrier to access this research. And finally, refocusing our decision making based on quality rather than quantity. So again, thinking carefully about the quality of the research, having that rigorous peer review process, having a process in which our board also scrutinizes the project and the reviews, and has a deep discussion about various aspects of the project, and feeds that back into the process. I'll move on to the next slide. This slide helps to illustrate some of the impact that I've mentioned, and is sort of a bit of a heat map of our downloads with access across 242 countries and territories. This is really what we had hoped we would see. So it's a really good sense check for us in terms of our global reach, but also proof of concept that removing those financial barriers to access to research does facilitate a greater global readership of that research. In addition to that, and part of our decision making about individual projects is that we feel that specialist research or kind of more niche topics are just as important as some of the big popular topics. And this slide gives you a sense of some of our more specialist research monographs and the metrics for those. And that audience, although smaller comparatively to some of the other books, are still very important, and illustrate that again, removing that barrier to access is enabling this research to find its audience in many different spaces. I couldn't do a presentation on the press without including a slide on textbooks, which is the program that I'm responsible for. Much, established in much the same way as our books program and with much of the same motivations. But really the pinch point for textbooks was the pandemic and the unsustainable pricing for licensing of ebook content. So we have 5 books that we have already published, and I've got thumbnails of them on the screen for you now. And the waste management and heritage studies textbooks are our most recent, and we have 11 additional titles forthcoming, including textbooks in astrophysics, business, medical sciences, linguistics, and health policy. So stay tuned on more information on those as they come through. But that's a separate sort of program running alongside our monographs publishing. I will end there, and thank you for the opportunity to join this webinar. I know we have a Q&A later, but if you have any questions after the event, please do feel free to reach out. I would love to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Dara, for this comprehensive presentation. I noted a few keywords from your presentation that very much echo what is important for us at EUA. One that the first one that I wanted to highlight, let's say, is the taking publishing back into the university. I think that this is really very much in line with what we meant by steered by the community and its institutions. I also noticed the importance of the societal impact, the role and the importance of supporting the work in arts, humanities, and social sciences. But from what you said also, I like the idea of the support to submissions from coming from early career researchers. So we may get back to that, and indeed encourage the audience to address one or other of those points at a later stage. With this, I thank you. We will get back to you afterwards. But before that, we will hear from Nienke from Leuven University Press. I understand that it is the first university press from Belgium with a dedicated open access, a fund for open access book publishing. So we'll hear from you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to speak at this joint webinar of the EUA and PALOMERA about institutional policies for open access books, something Leuven University Press has gained a lot of experience with in the past year. In 2015, the press published its first open access book, and 3 years later, the KU Leuven Fund for Fair Open Access came into being. So as an institutional funding mechanism for open access books. First, I would like to tell you a bit about our press. So we're an academic non-profit press of international repute, and we have been established in 1971. We are truly international. 60% of our authors come from abroad. A recent analysis of the publishing proposals showed that our authors are, of the past 2 years, are affiliated with institutions from 26 different countries across the globe. Over the decades, we've built a strong book collection in arts, humanities, and social sciences. To a minor extent, we publish journals, so we have 4 journals, but the lion's share are books. So we publish monographs, edited volumes, and textbooks. And we publish guaranteed peer review content. We're a hybrid press in the sense that we do both conventional and open access publishing, and in the past years we've been able to publish more than half of our peer-reviewed books in open access, an achievement that has been made possible thanks to the KU Leuven Fund for Fair Open Access. This is a slide that our marketing manager came up with, explaining our open access policy, also that we publish in green, gold, and diamond open access. What is important here is this free worldwide availability. We publish on 4 platforms: OAPEN, JSTOR, Open Research Library, and Project Muse. Our books are indexed in the DOAB and are retrievable through Google Scholar. We apply multiple funding programs, but the dominant and most important one is the institutional one, being the KU Leuven Fund for Fair Open Access. This was established in 2018 as an institutional funding body for open access publishing, and it is committed to sustainable implementation of fair open access. What do we mean by fair? Fair is non-profit, is full and immediate open access, so no embargoes, but also a transparent open access. This mainly concerns the fee structures regarding the author fees that need to be transparent. Also, it also covers the Creative Commons licenses, and that's a mission-driven form of publishing. KU Leuven Libraries it's a joint collaboration. They use the fund to sponsor open science publishers, infrastructures, and initiatives. We, as a press, use it to sponsor open access books. So this realizes a non-profit goal, open access book publishing. So free ebooks are readily available for everyone from the first day of publication onwards and are published under a Creative Commons license. The fund will partially cover the book processing charges. It's open to application to all authors, But there is a distinction, as I noticed also with data, between the KU Leuven affiliated and the non-KU Leuven affiliated authors. KU Leuven affiliated authors can apply for half of the book processing charges, whereas the non-affiliated authors can apply for 1/3 subvention of the book processing charges. From 2018 onwards, we have published 70 born open access books thanks to the fund, and 47 more are forthcoming. What are our procedures? So mainly it's the usual trajectory. So there will be a proposal submitted to Leuven University Press that is evaluated by an independent editorial board. Once the proposal has been given the green light by the editorial board, the manuscript will be submitted and followed by a peer review process. And after 2 positive peer reviews, we will apply for with the KU Leuven Fund for Fair Open Access, and this application will be evaluated by the relevant committee. So this means that we have 2 quality checks on the level of the proposal and on the level of the manuscript itself. And afterwards, we have the traditional publishing process. What is the benefit of the KU Leuven Fund for Fair Open Access? Well, it helps us as a press, but also the university to commit to realizing an open access agenda. It does not only benefit the press, but also the university and the scholarly community, for it brings into effect the worldwide free availability of high-quality, peer-reviewed scholarly research, increased invisibility and impact of research output. It allows the press to operate truly international without any financial or logistical barriers, and it, as a whole, it fosters the democratization of knowledge and fosters an inclusive academic community. And as an example, I would like to show you the readership data of the first book that was published in 2018, which is a part of the KU Leuven Fund for Fair Open Access. It's Focus of Modernity. In total, it's a similar chart as we have seen in the previous presentation. So we are between 2018 and 2023, we have almost 21,000 views and downloads. You've got, and these truly come from all over the world. So we have in Russia 237 downloads, in India 473, Australia more than 500. We've also got downloads in Ethiopia, Nigeria, US, Canada. So it's truly global. It really illustrates the loss of these barriers that are usually there. What's not in the slide is that there are also 2 translations published, one in Russian and one in Polish. So that shows, because it is published under a Creative Commons license, that the author is also able to even pursue its work beyond the English edition. So this was in brief how we function at KU Leuven. I want to thank you for your attention. Please do not hesitate to ask any additional questions or reach out if you're interested in discussing this topic more.
Thank you very much, Nienke. I see that questions are coming. Thank you very much, the members of the audience. Don't hesitate to keep on shooting. We will deal with them afterwards. From your presentation, what I also picked up on was the importance, again, bringing it back to what we consider as important at EUA, is the transparency of the cost, that this is really ingrained there, but also the importance of the institutional funding backing up and helping out the advancement of open access. In your presentation, and it was the same in Dara's presentation, I also wanted to pick up on the importance of textbooks, because okay, universities are higher education institutions, so research is performed, but it's also important very much to support the higher education mission. So that I picked up on too. We will probably get back to that. And finally, I also wanted to just like one of the keywords that came out of your presentation was the 2 steps or 2 levels for the quality checks. So I think we will hear more on the quality assurance in the next presentation. Thank you very much. And let's invite now Robert to come up on stage for the last but definitely not least important presentation. So you will tell us more about a joint undertaking. So it's a joint undertaking from so it's Berlin Universities, plural, publishing. It's a Diamond Open Access Publishing House serving 4 separate institutions, but I'm sure you will tell us all about it in your presentation. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the nice invitation, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about our publishing house, which is called, as you already mentioned, Berlin Universities Publishing, and we are the joint Diamond Open Access Publishing House of the Freie Universität Berlin, the Humboldt-Universität zu Berlin, the Technische Universität Berlin, and the Charité Universitätsmedizin Berlin. So 3 universities and their university medicine. And we think that Diamond Open Access and the consistent quality assurance is the best way to establish open book publishing, which is the reason why I called my presentation like that. So as I already told you, so Berlin University Publishing is the open access publishing. We are embedded in a scholar infrastructure, and we are a not-for-profit, and we also offer publisher-independent consultancy services. So that means when our researchers have questions regarding open access publishing, for example, where can I publish my open access book or my open access journal, or even an article in an open access journal, it's not our main goal that the outcome of the consultancy is that they publish with us, but that they are informed enough to make a decision. And of course, we are happy if they decide to publish with us, but it's not mandatory. We just want our researchers to be informed about open access publishing. The publishing house itself is divided into 3 branches. First of it is Berlin UP Books, which you already mentioned is the one where I am responsible for, the Berlin UP Journals branch, and the Berlin UP Consultancy branch. And on our website, you can download our already published open access books, and if available, you can also buy our print versions of the books. We have 2 decision-making committees. One is the board of directors, which consists of the heads of the 4 libraries. So from the 3 universities and the Charité, so the university medicine, so from all participating institutions. And we also have an academic advisory board, which consists of 12 researchers, 3 from each of the institutions. The academic advisory board is built up by established researchers as well as early stage researchers, and they come from the broad range of disciplines from the 4 institutions. The reason behind that is because we didn't want our scientific advisory board to be biased in some kind. So for example, if you have, let's say, 12 trained physicians or 12 people who come from the social or humanities science, then one might say that the focus of the publishing program maybe lies on that because of that. So we specifically asked people from different disciplines to act as the academic advisory board, and luckily we were very successful with that. So these 2 decision-making committees are the ones who decide on the proposals. So it's pretty similar to the KU Leuven. And afterwards, we have a consistent quality assurance, which basically means peer review then. So in our mission statement, we state that we are an academic, non-commercial open access publisher for all disciplinary foci of the Berlin research landscape, basically for all 4 institutions. And we take specific requirements of subject-specific publication cultures into account. That means, for example, if you have an editorial board for a series in humanities or, let's say, historical sciences, and the editorial board says that the established way of scientific quality assurance is an editorial review, then we do not force them to do single-blind or double-blind peer review, but we trust our editorial boards. But it has to be an established way in the specific field of research, or, for example, in some fields, it's still necessary to have a printed book as well. Then, of course, we offer the opportunity to print the books. We promote the open access transformation of existing publications. This mainly so that mainly applies to the Berlin UP Journals branch, of course, and we strive to cooperate with other publishers and publication service providers, as we cannot do all our services, which are sometimes required to publish a book in-house. We have some established cooperations with external service providers. And therefore, we think that we follow the demands of research organizations and funding agencies to enable publication infrastructures of public institutions. And with that, we think that we contribute to the necessary diversity of the publication landscape. So as we are here today to talk about open access policies, I wanted to show you our main pillars of our open access policies. All our publications appear as first publications in open access without delay. So that means we do not have any embargo of 6 or 12 months, and that applies to the books as well as to the journals. As well, actually, as our whole open access policy, it's one policy for all our publications. We do not have a policy for journals and for books, but one for all our formats. We do not charge any publication fees for our own services, but as I already told you, sometimes it's necessary to work together with external service providers. And of course, as they are not subsidized as we are, they need some money for their services, but we are not for profit, so the money goes directly to the service providers and not to the publishing house. Authors and editors transfer only simple rights of use to Berlin UP. So if they want, for example, publish their book later, whysoever with another publisher, or they want to publish a translation of their book with another publisher, it's fine, and they have the rights to do so because we only need the simple rights of use. All publications receive, of course, persistent identifiers for the findability and long-term identifiability, and all our metadata are freely accessible and machine readable and reusable, because we think that open access is only possible if you have open infrastructures and open data. We also recommend to publish research data and link them to the publication, but that's not mandatory. It's only if the editors or the authors want to do so, then they have the opportunity to do so. And the long-term archiving and availability is guaranteed by the use of our repositories. So for example, our open access books are published, so you can access them about our web shop, but they are stored, the full texts are stored in our repository from the TU Berlin. So publications with Berlin UP are visible worldwide, accessible without charges, and reusable. So, as it was already mentioned, that Berlin University's publishing is a joint venture from 4 institutions. What's the difference with that, or what are we doing new compared to other university publishing? So every Berlin University publishing has undergone a subject-specific peer review process. So it has to be, or it doesn't have to be double-blind peer review or single-blind peer review, but it has to be established in the specific field of research. And the review process for monographs, and in some cases for the edited volumes, is organized by Berlin UP itself. For book series, the editors are responsible for the quality assurance. So they are looking for reviewers, and they are making decisions based on the reviews. And for monographs, and as I said, in some kinds for edited volumes, we are doing it so. And the research quality assurance is also part of the proposal forms for books and journals. So no proposal will be accepted without a consistent quality assurance concept. And because we think it's necessary and important to have transparent peer review or transparent quality assurance, it's displayed for every publication. So the quality assurance is part of the publisher contract, and we have a quality assurance guideline, a peer review guideline on our website, and the kind of quality assurance which was applied for the respective publication is displayed in the publication itself, and that applies for the print and for the online version. So therefore, we stand for research integrity. And I do not want to go with you through the whole diagram here, but what I want to show you, it's quite similar to the KU Leuven. We also have these well, 2 or 3 stages of the quality assurance. So first, there is a formal check of the proposal, which is carried out by us, so by the book branch. And afterwards, the board of directors checks the proposal for formal criteria, and afterwards then the scientific advisory board. And only if these 2 decision-making committees say that they want to include it into the publishing program, then the quality assurance or the peer review starts. And only if that is also positive or comes out with a positive decision, then it's finally accepted for the publishing program and then published. And we also, if we organize a peer review, we also ask at least 2 reviewers, at least, because if the reviews show in 2 different directions, for example, one reviewer wants to accept the manuscript and the other one wants to decline it, then we ask a 3rd reviewer for that. And we are the joint publishing house for the 4 institutions, so therefore we are the publishing house of 3 universities and their medicine, and therefore for more than 10,000 researchers with more than 1,000 academic chairs and professorships. So of course that comes with different subject specifications and different experience and expertises in publishing. And of course what's not said on the slide, but as you probably all can imagine, from different views on open access and different starting points of open access. In some fields, the open access, the thinking of open access or the concept of open access is well more established than in other ones. So that's of course a key challenge for all participating institutions. And just for the end, I just wanted to talk shortly about our admission criteria, because affiliation is not enough. So we are so far we do not have a business model for external people, but only for the members of our 4 institutions. And as you can see down below, open access is one of our admission criteria, but we have way more. For example, that the target group and the scope of the publication should be clearly visible and distinctively described in the publication and in the proposal itself. So what is the actual difference? We are a cooperative and quality assurance scholarly owned publishing house. We publish in Diamond Open Access with a broad academic spectrum, and we offer publisher independent consultings. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Robert. Also a very good case. From your presentation, what were the elements that I got out of those that were not mentioned already, is the focus on the diversity of the publication landscape. It was already alluded to in the other cases, and of course quality assurance that was mentioned also, but linked very specifically to research integrity. I think that nowadays it's really important. Also, obviously, the immediate open access, no embargo, and we will get to the Q&A. They mentioned that it's transfer of usage rights. So we will get to that in the next part of the discussion. So we will, I will invite now all the speakers to come back on. Yes, thank you so much. And then we will start with the questions. So the first question I wanted to ask is for all of you. It's the one from Paul Stokes. What steps have you taken or will you be taking to ensure long-term access to content and its long-term usability? So of course, it's about digital preservation and third-party content and reference. So maybe we start with the last one, with Robert, because you also mentioned that in your presentation. Could you elaborate a bit on this one?
Well, I think it comes with by default with the mode of how we present our publications. So all our books are, as I said, stored on our repositories, and they are so they offer the long-term archivability by default. So it's guaranteed by that.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll get back to that because it's a joint effort and a joint undertaking, so it may have some specificities there. Yeah, do you want to comment on this one?
Yeah, I'm happy to comment on this one. It's a really good question. So much like Robert, we store all of our open access books on our repository. We've recently also saved everything onto another archive, so we've sort of double saved our content, so we save it on, preserve it on Portico as well. But with a lot of our open access book content, we also post it in lots of different places. So we will send files to JSTOR, and JSTOR will have, you know, a set of files that people can access. We will save a copy on, you know, DOAB. So we're sending that file out to a lot of different places, but we have two places where we archive our content. In terms of links, that is certainly something we discuss with a lot of our authors as well, where they're referencing and linking out to websites or YouTube videos or things like that. You know, there is obviously concern that in future those links might become defunct, or, you know, out of our control, that those links don't work anymore. And where possible, instead of including a web link, to have more of a descriptor for people to be able to search for these items. Because, you know, if it's referencing an image with a web link, and that web link suddenly doesn't work, or that website takes it down, we want readers to be able to, you know, be able to find that image again. So you know, whether you could put, whether an author could put maybe more of a descriptive you know, pathway versus you know, a web link that might become corrupted or change over time. So that is a discussion that we have with our authors, because our content is primarily digital. So yeah, it is something we have to think about.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's important indeed to ensure that. Linke, do you want to come in on this one?
Well, we basically do the same as Dara has been explaining. We're also, one of our suppliers is also looking into the possibility of creating perma links, so permanent links, and so we'll be running a trial and error procedure there. So this is something that we also are starting to take a look at.
Thank you. Michael, do you have anything that you want to comment on based on the analysis of the policies? So is this addressed in the policies, and how so?
Definitely, preservation of open access books was one of my larger research projects before I became involved with PALOMERA, so it's very close to my heart. And I saw that within the recommendations, for example, we mentioned preservation 8 different times. So there are recommendations for publishers as well as the different policy setters to take care that this long-term access would also be enabled. But of course, it shouldn't be the only way, but also for libraries, for example, we have a recommendation that of course, repository mirroring is also a way to create an extra backup copy, but it's not the same as having it in a you know, purpose-built preservation long-term service. So, but yes, it's present, and I think that will be an important part also of future policies to ensure that the books are by someone long-term archived and not just leave it up to chance.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you all. I'll follow up on another question that was initially specifically for Dara. So I will start with you, but then I will invite the others to comment if they want. So the question is the following. You mentioned briefly that the press is embedded in the library services. And can you develop a bit on how you work with library colleagues?
Yeah, again, a really great question. It's been, in my experience and my colleagues' experience, it's been a real benefit to be in close proximity to our library colleagues in terms of helping to steer some decision making or advise us in terms of a direction, because they have such a close connection with researchers and teaching faculty, and a wider lens in terms of other resources available. Whereas, you know, as publishing professionals, we you know, focus and commission and work project by project. They have this wider lens of knowing what kind of other resources are available. And that said, there can be some challenges, which requires a very open, approach of an open communication and knowledge exchange. As publishing professionals, we have very specific experience and expertise in things like commissioning, production, marketing, and that can be quite jarring sometimes, in terms of timescales and costs, and being able to communicate that effectively to colleagues that don't have that experience or haven't come from that background. And so in order to make, effective, efficient decisions, we do need to be able to communicate what we need to library colleagues, and for them to understand why and how we need that, and to make that kind of process work. So it does involve a lot of, back and forth, some clear communication and knowledge exchange. But we found with their buy-in, it's really cemented our place in our institution. As a relatively small press, we really need the backing of financially, but also kind of, in lots of other ways, the support of library services to make sure that our voice is being heard when we're asking for things, or communicating things to our institution. So getting them on side has been incredible, and a real help for us in terms of growth.
Great, thank you. Ninke, do you have the same experience?
Well, we work a bit different. We are the publishing house and the KU Leuven libraries are two separate entities within the same university. So we're set up as a business unit. So we also function in a different way, but we do work closely together on certain dossiers, such as open access publishing, or the KU Leuven Fund for Fair Open Access is a joint collaboration. And besides these instances, it's also very interesting to learn from one another. So for instance, if we would consider collaborating with a certain open access platform, does that open access platform truly reach the libraries? So these are for us very, because the library is at a different part of the chain, of the knowledge chain, it's very interesting to learn from each other.
Thank you. Yeah, it's important you mentioned indeed that the model is not exactly the same.
Yes.
So yes, and then therefore but I understand that the communication line is still a very efficient way of working. Anyway.
Yes.
Robert, on your side, so obviously here you have also the fact that it's, if I understood correctly, hosted by one out of the universities coming from the Alliance, but how does that work specifically?
Well, that it's hosted by only one of the university. That's the case for the books, and that's just because we wanted to have one place where we host all the full texts of the books. So that's why it's hosted at the TU Berlin, and they're formerly the predecessor of the book branch of Berlin UP was the university publishing house of the TU Berlin. So that was quite a natural decision. But that the publishing house itself is part of the 4 libraries is probably also quite natural, and is rooted certainly in the publishing system, or in the university system in Germany, because open access, all the open access activity, or a significant part of the open access activity at the university, is managed by the libraries, and it's a standard service of the libraries, and therefore almost all university publishing houses in Germany are actually set up in the libraries, because that's where the expertise is. And above that, of course, people working in libraries, and librarians, of course, are experts in curating metadata and data in general. So it's part of their job description by default to work with these data.
Great, thank you. Michael, from your side, any comments on the connection, the relationship based on the different models that we have out there?
Not really. I think we don't really have a clear, it's a bit too, not messy, but maybe not really mature yet to give any recommendations for what could be like the way to coordinate it. But I think many of these things are a bit, again, too really early for anyone to give some type of even general indications for what works. I think it's a bit of experimentation still concerning this.
Okay. Yeah, but this is an information on its own. Thank you. Now I'll turn to, so it's for all of you, but I will start with Robert. It's a very long question. It relates to the licensing in a way. So I'll try to sum it up. So it's about the fact that several, here it said many or even all, university presses demand authors to transfer their copyright to the university press or to give an exclusive license for the duration of the copyright. Which is not the case from what I understand in your case, Robert. But basically the idea is that it would be, I guess, interesting and nice to have for open access books just a non-exclusive license to publish in one particular language and or rights. That those rights, including the copyright and all commercial rights, remain in the hands of the author. And that comes from Erna Sattler. I would like you to start the round because you addressed that in your presentation, so you may want to comment on that specifically.
Yeah, so I hope I understood the question correctly. But when in our contracts for the for publishing books and journals, we do not. So we only need the simple rights of use. So we do not need exclusive rights of use. So all of the rights stay with the authors. So there's a so the rights retention is guaranteed for the authors. So if they want to publish a translation afterwards, or even another version of the book, or the same book with another publisher, it's still possible. The only thing that we, let's say, require is that it's published under a true open access license, and we then rely on the Berlin Declaration, and so we say open access is only given if it's published under a CC BY or at least a CC BY SA license. So of course you transfer some rights also to the public, but still the copyright and all the rights of use stay with the authors after that as well. So the problem of exclusive rights or the transfer of exclusive rights is more it's a way which is more common for commercial publishers, I'd say.
Yes, indeed. So thank you for that. Ninke, in your case, you have, let's say, both sides here. So what is your take on that comment from the audience?
Well, we publish our open access content by default with a it cannot, otherwise it's not open access. We publish it with a Creative Commons license. We do choose the most restrictive version, but of NC, non-commercial and no derivatives. But this is actually as a form of protection for, let's say, feeding your content to large language models, so these type of things. But if an author insists on a CC BY license, this is not a problem, so it's negotiable. So actually, for me, this isn't a non-exclusive license. It's more like a right of first publication of an English text, but the author is free to negotiate with another publisher for a French language edition or for us the copyright remains with the author, in fact, with this type of Creative Commons license. And we do also, because we also publish paywalled books, there we have the exclusive license, but this is a different type of publishing. So
good, thank you. From your side, Dara, on this one?
Yeah, very similar to Ninki. We have we publish under the Creative Commons license. So once that material has published, the author can really do what they like with it. We advocate for the freest of the licenses, so CC BY or CC BY NC. In terms of translation, we have a lot of authors that get back in touch with us and ask about the possibility of translation, and our response is always the same: you are free to do that, you know, as you wish. We unfortunately can't facilitate that. You know, you will have to find a foreign language publisher that you can work with, and somebody to translate it if you can't do that yourself. But you know, in terms of rights, you're free to do that. Yeah, so you know, we try to make that as easy as possible for our authors. And let me just keep reading this question, make sure that I've got everything. Yeah, again, our contracts stipulate only English language, so yeah, they're free to do what they like with the content for other languages. And then also once it's published, the CC BY license allows you to modify, adjust, reproduce in lots of different ways. So yeah.
Thank you. Michael, that was one of the 17 dimensions you were looking for. What can you tell us about that?
Well, again, it's very diverse, and that's like among our recommendations, we just ask for clarity, like that there should be an open license appended to whatever content is made open access, be it whatever model. That's again the challenge that many universities are currently mentioning green open access also for books, so like self-archiving, and then usually, of course, you can come to an agreement with a publisher that you can do it under a permissive license. Often maybe not. So it's really a tricky question. And I think as long as everything is moving around, it's just better to have a clear license attached to every piece of content. And then the nuances of which CC license it is more of a preference thing. But of course, some funders have quite hard restrictions on having only CC BY count as the only flavor they're funding. So that's also fine. But for those thinking about alternatives, I think it's already far along the way to have a clear license appended and required in the policy, rather than leaving it up for interpretation for the whoever is supposed to follow it.
Thank you. Well, it's an easy leeway for me to the next one, because let's talk about the elephant in the room, financial sustainability. So I will here group two questions. One from Lucy Ames: how do you ensure financial sustainability? Does all funding come from the universities? Do you have other sources of subsidies? To what extent do paper copy sales still generate revenue? So that's one. And I think it goes well with another one from Kira Hopkins. What role have national/funder policies and mandates played in shaping the policy? So it's about like, what is the funding that you get? What are the sources? But at the same time, do research funding organizations play a role in the mandates and the policies that have presided over your work? I'll start with Ninke.
Yes, well, we have both open access publication and also paywall content. So our resources come from physical sales and for open access books from subventions or subsidies. But I think this question is, how shall I put it? It depends on your structure. If your entire organization as a publisher or as an institutional publisher is subsidized by the university, then it's a different matter than when you have to sustain your activity yourself by sales. So it's a different perspective. that you need to apply. So I think it's a very mixed. It's very ad hoc.
Yes.
How you organize yourself. If you want to be in my opinion, to publish only open access, then it's very hard if you're not completely subvented.
Yeah, understood. Any influence of the research funding agency from Flanders in Belgium in the policies?
Not in a structural way.
Okay.
Yes. I believe there are examples from other countries, the National Science Fund, that have a more structural subsidy means to subsidize gold or diamond open access, but this is again, it's a case-by-case situation.
Great, thank you. Robert, on to you on this one. So can you remind us how it is, how is the financing part organized, and just also allude to the possible, if any, impact of mandates from the research funding organizations?
Yeah, sure. So we had a project funding phase in the beginning of the publisher, and during that phase, over 3 years, we were funded by the Berlin University Alliance. And this, the money for the Berlin University Alliance came from the DFG, so Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, a German research foundation. So not all of the positions, but some of the positions within the publishing house were then project positions. But it was one of the promise why the publishing house was founded, that it's not only a project, but will serve as a permanent infrastructure. And that's why we are now subsidized by the 4 libraries. So all these project positions turned into permanent positions. So that's why we are now a sustainable infrastructure of all the 4 institutions, which is subsidized by the libraries and of course then by the universities. And that's actually one of the reasons why we do not need to have any profit or any revenue. So we do not charge any book processing charges for our in-house services. And for example, if we sell books in print, then the price for the print copy is only as high as if required for the reprinting. So it's a print-on-demand model only focused on refinancing the reprints and not to generate any profit for the publishing house. And for the part of the question with the open access policies, so I'd say as we have an open access policy for the publisher itself, it's more inspired by the 4 open access policies of the 4 institutions. But of course, these open access policies were, let's say, inspired by the by the questions or the concerns raised by the DFG or the EU.
Great, thank you. So from Belgium to Germany, we go back to UK on your side. Is there anything you wanted to say on this one?
Yeah, so you know, we are mostly funded by our parent institution, and UCL has made a long-term commitment to this project. So you know, in terms of what we need to be doing as a press is really continuing to demonstrate value and benefit in order to keep that funding going for another 10 years. So really a key aspect of doing that, again, sort of 10 years in, is to ensure that our objectives and mission and the way in which we're producing books and the kinds of books we're producing, that maps onto our parent institutions' priorities and their mission and vision. You know, the closer we can get to aligning with our institutions', you know, key priorities, the more kind of stable our funding will be in terms of future. But yeah, I mean, UCL it has been very unique in that it's made this long-term commitment, and that's enabled us to grow in the way that we have. Book sales is an interesting question. We have a statistics page on our website that shows you downloads, but also book sales. So you can see for any given book or across a period of time how many books people are buying on POD. And we still get people buying substantial numbers for certain topics, and interesting patterns to see, and whether politics and security really like their print copies of their books versus the or engineering or anthropology, whether they're preferring the print or the digital, or if they want both. We're seeing a lot of people get both. So yeah, interesting to see that, but really that's such a small portion of revenue. We don't really focus too much on that. We're not driving the book sales. So that's just an add-on that gets kind of, at the end of the year, sort of put back into the pot and part of the financial ecosystem of the press.
Great, thank you. Michael, on this, anything you want to comment on based on the research you did in the PALOMERA project?
Well, I would say that if funding is mentioned in the policies, it's usually like book processing charges that are sponsored. So there's really, within the policies, no other funding mechanism that would really be of any substantial presence in those. And that's, of course, a bit like problematic in a way because there's a lot of promise, of course, in these collective funding models where it would be more of a distributed effort to fund a larger body of books, and not just each externally funded book being funded by that specific research funder, but rather creating more of an ecosystem where libraries sponsor amounts of money into larger networks of books that become published. But there's still like a huge gap between, I would say, even authors and those collective funding models. So that if you know that you are under an OA policy, you know that your book needs to be available open access, I still think it feels like quite a long road to make sure as an author you get enrolled in one of these collective funding models and publishers within them and selected as a title to be published collectively by a network. So yeah, there's still a lot of work to do, and I think commercial publishers don't have anything to sweat about at the moment. I think there's a lot of work to be done for anything to really at the moment compete with just the convenience for BPCs when it comes to how research funders want to pay for their the openness of their outputs.
Great, thank you for that note. Okay, we're getting to the end of this session. There are still questions out there. I invite the speakers to take a minute, if they can, to just also type in responses as they feel like it. Before we close, or as a closing, maybe a round for all of you. This is one of the questions we had for you, but we did not have time to address because the audience was so engaged. In short, what would be, according to you, the added value of having a specific policy for open access books at institutional level? So I'll go back in the order of presentation. So Michael.
Yes, so the value for the institution. Well, I think I've been kind of the spokesperson here for clear policies and the presence of policies, that even though you don't want to be a pioneer, or you don't have a huge resources backing, like open-handedly sponsoring open access book publishing, I still think it sends the right signal. If books are mentioned in a policy, they can be just recommended to be open access. They don't need to be required, but I think you need to be very careful about what words you use there, because it has huge implications, I think, for how everything is perceived if you are requiring stuff but you are not following it up. So I think just creating more awareness of the option, and then those that have maybe resources from their own funding sources can then see if they can do something about it. But I think all institutions should consider including mention of open access books as something they would like to maybe work on in the future within their policies, at least.
Thank you. Dara, on to you.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, you know, it adds a level of transparency, and in terms of a clear OA policy within the institution, but also within the, you know, for open access publishers to have a clear policy, it helps authors make the best decision for their work. It's really difficult to scour through lots of different websites to see who's offering what, and you know, all of those kinds of benefits and challenges for authors when they make a decision about who to publish with.
Great, thank you. Nienke, your turn.
Well, this is more on a principle note. A matter of principle, by developing an open access book policy, you can truly, as an institution, on an institutional level, you have the option to truly foster the democratization of knowledge, of research, of scholarly output. And this is something that, in the end, if the cycle has been run through, that you will, as an institution, also benefit by yourself.
Thank you. And Robert?
Yeah, actually, I'm not sure if it's really needed to have a single open access book policy, but I think it's necessary that open access books and open access journals are addressed in the same way with the same priority, because I think the added value of that is that not only funding institutions can see that it's an important topic, but also for the researchers, because as we all know, there are fields, there are research fields where the scholarly communication is solely based or mainly based on book publishing. And if these researchers do not see that there is any funding opportunity or any publishing opportunity for them to publish their work in open access, then of course, why should they do in the first place? So I think that's the main added value to mention books in any open access policy.
Great, thank you all. It's 1 minute past, so it's time for us to close this webinar. I would like to thank you very much all for your active contribution. The speakers for having accepted our invitation, as well as the audience for having been engaged throughout the webinar. I would like to thank also my colleagues from EUA who have facilitated this webinar, Aurélie Clenet and Federica Garbulia. And then just invite you all to stay tuned and just to engage via this event platform, because the recording will be available, as well as additional material from the PALOMERA project. So if you want to know more about this, it will be posted anytime soon. So with this, I close. I thank you very much, and I wish you a good end of afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Can you hear me already?